We're going to cover March's AI updates, and seemingly as always, there were so many of them. And specifically, I wanted to bring in Lee Evans, Program Manager of Learning and Development. Good morning, Lee.
Good morning.
And I also want to bring in Charles Dunn, Manager of Cognition's Data Program. How are you doing, Charles?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. I figured you two can cover our topics so thoroughly. So let's dive into it. This past month, I don't know if I've been asked more about Skynet, and it's probably for a good reason. Figure One, I don't know if you all saw this, right? But Figure One with OpenAI shared a clip of a humanoid robot with speech-to-speech reasoning. They weren't alone. NVIDIA also displayed their own robot at their conference just last week. Lee, did you see these? And what were your impressions?
Well, Rich, thank you for having me. And yes, I did. My first impression is this what Arnie meant when he said, "I'll be back"? Right? Totally jaw-dropping, right? To even answer that question properly, I felt like we first just need to acknowledge the problem statements that were revolving around Gen AI as it matured. First, it was data, right? Just getting the data. Then it became a variety of the data. Then it became something known as compute power. That's where we were. And scientifically, the best way to describe what's happened with compute power now is that nobody wanted to, as a scientist, just build a bigger computer to do more, right? That's not the approach that they wanted to take to solving the compute power issue, but it was all that we had. And then you insert NVIDIA's Blackwell platform, all right, that GPU developed by NVIDIA to be the successor to Hopper microarchitecture. And that's what we're seeing here now, to where this Blackwell platform has the computational ability to create new infrastructure so that we can do Gen AI at an extremely high level, insane amounts of computing that can happen in the blink of an eye. So I won't dig into NIMS. I don't think I even want to dig into Nemo unless we want to dive deeper into that later. But what we've seen happen from it is something known as Omniverse, which is NVIDIA's operating system for the robotics world. And what this does is gives you an extensible robotic simulation platform that provides a better way to design, test, and train your AI-based robots. So scalability is there. It's photorealistic. Physically accurate virtual environments to build out these simulations. So now this is where you get your self-driving car. This is where you get your humanoid robot or manufacturing robotics. And so all of these things are coming into play now, which are mind-blowing just to see it happening with NVIDIA now, and to see you ask the computer or this robot and say, "Hey, give me something on the table to eat." And it scans the table, looks at the silverware, and then sees the apple, picks up the apple, hands it to you, and will reason with you on why it did what it did. And all of that is possible because of the Blackwell, what we were talking about before. So that new platform, and that it is groundbreaking technology, and it's so exciting. But I pass it back to you, Rich and team. But yeah, that's what I've seen, and it's kind of got me really stoked for the future.
I don't blame you. I mean, that Blackwell chip, the GPU, it takes it to the next level. I want to ask you a question though, Lee. You obviously saw the video, so the robot will go grab this and move it around. What did you think about the way it was conversational, the way it spoke, the stutters a little bit? What were your thoughts?
That is extremely, very, very interesting. It's a nuanced approach to being able to make it more human and more realistic. So when you hear the pause, or when you hear when it has an as what I just did there. So when you hear those things and when they take place, it really makes that robot much more human, human feeling, much more realistic. And I think that is an amazing level of code that has been put into the software now that we are able to see and kind of interact with. I don't think people are going to appreciate it as much if you don't know what really went behind that to get it to this level, because Charlie, is it petabytes? Is petabytes of data that are moving like this, for it to be able to do that, which is mind blowing.
I mean, you gave me the baton, just pass it right to Charlie, right? So thanks for that, Lee. Charlie, Lee just kind of asked this, right? Though it's impressive, should we be worried too much about robot population taking over anytime soon? Tell us what's under the hood of these robots and humanoids right now.
No. Okay. So the conversational aspect is powered by ChatGPT. It is powered by the way that the robot does text to text. That's just ChatGPT backend. So all of the language that we've all been using on chatbots is the same. That's the same technology that powers the text to text. But the interesting thing to me is now we're getting to the point where we can do text to generative text, but we can do text to generative text that is associated with interactions in the physical world. So it's that kind of mapping of a robot response. Hey, give me an apple. If we have computer vision that's able to look at objects, recognize an apple. We have text to command, which associates the word apple with what an apple is supposed to look like. And now we're mapping give me an apple to commands to the robot. Now, personally, I think that the humanoid robot is kind of a gimmick. It's a sales pitch. It's something that the practical use case of it is not really there yet, because bipedal walking is still really hard. It is still really hard to solve that problem in the physical world. But to me, the holy grail, so to speak, of this generation of robotics is going to be the clothes folding robot. Because if you think back, I like to think about previous revolutions of technology. Think about what changed for people with the invention of the dishwasher and the washing machine. Folding clothes is still a task that takes a really long time, and it's something that requires very fine controlled motor interactions with your hands. If you can have a robot to do those kinds of repetitive domestic tasks, that's an example of a practical use case for these machines. Are we going to give them? Are we going to give them guns? Maybe, probably, but we shouldn't. Is what I'm saying. I think we should stick to the folding clothes before we get to the Terminator stuff.
Charlie, I got to tell you, I actually was just reading last night about the 2 attempts of robots being created to fold clothes. Now, I'm sure a lot of audience members, that's how you spend your evenings as well. But there were 2 attempts. The one was a humanoid who was having trouble pulling out clothes from piles, right, to figure out the corners and all that stuff and then folding it. And when they did get to create one, it cost more than a Bentley. The other one that they had was kind of like a fax machine looking one where you had to put the clothes into it. It would fold it and put it in a pile, but it kind of still took up the human time, right? So very interesting. That is still the challenge with robotics is being able to do these things that almost we humans take for granted. So and we will get, what is her name? Rosie from the Jetsons. We will get her maybe eventually, but we're not anywhere close. A few quick notes before we jump over to our next topic real quick. Figure 1 in OpenAI, they say that the goal is to replace unsafe and undesirable human jobs. Going back to Lee was talking about NVIDIA, the NVIDIA researchers, Jim Found is his name, are calling it the moonshot to solve embodied AGI in the physical world. So I believe that's something both Lee, Charles, you were talking about. I know AGI is whatever it is in the future, but wanted to cover those 2 before we go here. All right. Thank you both. Let's hop on over to, let's stick with Charles in this one. The AI startup called Cognition Labs released an AI tool that can autonomously code and even train other AI models. They're even giving it a name, Devin. So Charles, can you tell us about this, please?
First of all, they should stop giving these models cutesy names. Just they end all their videos by saying thank you, Devin. It's like, okay, that's a little too cute, I think. But so I am wary of this. I watched their videos. what they have put out, it's impressive looking, but I don't know how effective it is going to be in practice. So basically, what Devin does is you give it a set of instructions, and then it has and then it follows those instructions, and it's specialized to write code. And all of the examples were things like, here, follow the instructions from this blog post, follow the README from this GitHub repo. And yes, it is impressive, but you're still giving it a series of instructions intended for developers anyway. So the one example, the one you mentioned, train this AI model, well, they gave it a link to a GitHub repo, and the GitHub repo had the instructions that you had to do in order to train the model yourself. Essentially, they gave it a list of buttons to push, and then the model was able to do that. Again, we're still going back to it's text to text,
right,
and then text to commands. Instead of commands to a robot, as it was in the previous example, now it's commands to a development environment in this case. So we'll see how well Devin scales to real life applications. But again, this company is like if you go to their website, everything about them is less than a month old, and the tool isn't even in the hands of the public yet, as far as I can tell. So I'm cautious about this. But at a higher level, this is another holy grail, so to speak, of these development tools. You want to be able to give the machine instructions, and then it writes the code based on the instructions that you give it. And as someone who works in development, that tool is so development requires specific, actionable instructions from a client, which is a thing that humans have never achieved. So I don't know if the AI is going to do it.
So you're saying you have a little bit of doubts there. Lee, I have a question for you on more so the learning and development and with your past experience, but did you want to comment on any of the technical things that Devin showcased, or at least Cognition did?
If I can keep it to a minimum, because there's so much. It really is. We could boil the ocean, but we'd be here for some time, right? But if you just take it back to what he had mentioned, as far as, if I could just rewind it back, when you talked about the bipedal walking, right? We had mentioned about this and the idea of robotics. I had just had a discussion in Dallas, Texas, with one of the leading one of the leading robotics people within robotics, and I asked him, "What are you doing within robotics right now?" He says, "I'm doing floors." So what are you talking about? His whole business is about floors, because for robots to be in a warehouse and to function properly, that floor has to be perfect going across, has to be extremely smooth. So even within that alone, you have to think about, okay, so to get this, what else do you need to do? And that just kind of blew my mind, right? So to hear about folding clothes, I would love for that to happen currently right now. My son is helping me, but I don't, he's 2, so I don't know how much help is happening right now. But I'm just very interested in the things that Charlie's mentioning here and how it's all taking place. And quite frankly, with Devin, I'm not as impressed yet. There's much more that needs to show before I can come and give you 3 claps, right? You take me back to ChatGPT when it first came out. There's some things that it did extremely well, and some areas where, of course, we're looking to improve. So I would say the jury is still out, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's play the game then. Let's play that game, because we've seen even ChatGPT with the very impressive achievements and advances in a year, right?
Yep.
Even the past couple months. So with someone, and for those of you that don't know, Lee is someone with obviously a very strong L&D background, and also a phenomenal recruiting background. What type of impact do you think, let's say this, Devin, let's say it's legitimate, let's say it will continue to improve. How could something like this impact lower level engineering jobs if it continues at that pace?
Tell you what, I think that the impact on lower level engineering jobs, it would be multifaceted, some potential effects. I think the number one that everybody's thinking about is job displacement. Because Gen AI could actually automate many routine engineering tasks such as data analysis, drafting, documentation. So they reduce the need for low-level engineers to perform these repetitive tasks that can be automated. However, when one door closes, normally another one opens. And I'm thinking that it will be a shift in job responsibilities. So Gen AI may shift the focus of a lower-level engineering away from routine tasks towards more strategic and creative endeavors like innovation, design, problem solving, rather than manual data analysis or documentation. Who wants to do that anyway? Right. So does this mean that these engineers will have to acquire new skills to remain relevant in the workforce? Absolutely. But that was something that was going to happen anyway. It's just sped up. And of course, this now promotes increased efficiency for those who collaborate with these AI systems. So I've always said that Gen AI won't take an engineer's job if that engineer uses Gen AI as best as they can as they move forward. Right. I think it takes the job of the person who stays stagnant, who is focused in legacy systems, whose idea of being digitally transformative involves mainframe. That's my joke, mobile, right? So it still has some uses. I will say it still has some uses, but you get what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, with all of us in learning and development, that is a true belief, is as long as you keep accelerating your own knowledge in tandem with it, you'll be fine, right? It's just a matter of if you stay still.
Yeah.
So great. So let's just jump to another update, right? That's what we're here for today. And Charles, Anthropic's Claude 3, not only did they just receive $2.75 billion from Amazon, but this thing was released this past month and had strong reviews, surpassing many peer models and a handful of common evaluation benchmarks. Graduate level reasoning, math, common knowledge, all surpassing Google's Gemini as well as OpenAI's ChatGPT. Can you share some of the highlights of this new release?
So, from what I have been reading, Anthropic's Claude 3 model is really, really good at passing benchmarks. So, okay, maybe that's a little mean, but there have been some posts. But there've been posts about where Claude knows it's being tested. Like they did the test where they inserted text into works of literature that shouldn't be there, and Claude said, I'm being tested. Well, again, it's trained on the tests. The tests are part of the training data. This actually goes back to Lee's point before, where these models are trained on vast corpuses of already existing knowledge. Repetitive tasks that have already been solved, they can do really well. And speaking of code, some of my peers, some of people who I follow in the industry have said that Claude is currently the best model at understanding and using code. So one person who I was watching them use it, they had a custom Svelte library, that's a JavaScript framework, and compared to ChatGPT and Google's Gemini, Claude was able to understand the custom library and implement it correctly. So, for these kinds of technical tasks, Claude is currently probably the leader. It is passing the benchmarks. That is correct, but it doesn't do image analysis as well as some of Chat's models. So Claude is strictly surpassing text benchmarks at this point, and that is very impressive.
Got it. Got it. And the full write up is on Anthropic's website. And they actually are releasing 3 different models of Claude 3, Haiku, Sonnet, and Opus, I believe it is. So this testing all was on its best one, Opus, right? Haiku is coming out later. So excellent. Thank you for that, Charles. Keeping in mind our time here, I want to jump to our last and final topic here. OpenAI announced that they're paying creators part of revenue of for when they make GPTs, right? They have that GPT store that they have released. These GPTs would be accessible through that store only. Lee, why is this a beneficial thing for, I would say, let's start with advancement, or do you have some challenges or doubts even?
Indeed. All right, let's deal with the advancement because the first thing that I would say here is that although many different GPT applications currently seem similar in their content and functionality right now, I mean, some would say the evolution of technology and the changing market demands that we're seeing more now, because the tasks are becoming more specific, then the tools can become more specific, right? Or the models themselves. So these applications that could be created in the future would offer a unique value beyond the basic model, thereby bringing greater revenue to the developer. So it's like it could work. It definitely could work. Now, when these developers are combining GPT technology to specific needs, they can create indeed very interesting and valuable applications. So it's not just a technology challenge, it's more of an innovative opportunity, right? So bringing both things together, bringing both minds. I would end on this is that right now, these GPT applications are probably going to struggle to generate any significant direct value, revenue, right? Revenue wise, but it will lay the foundation for brand building in the future, like user engagement, long-term development. So I'm thinking that in the future, we could see more. But as per what I'm seeing right now, the better that these GPTs become, the less, I'm scared to say this, but Charlie, help me out. Rich, help me out. The better that they become, almost the less valuable that they can become. Have you seen this?
Walk us through that a little bit.
Okay. So if you let's take, for example, just GPT 3.5, right? You take GPT 3.5, I'm able to use that to gain information, right? So I can get my job done quicker and make things happen much quicker and easily available right now, right? But at the same time, there can be other software that can do that exact same thing because it's now open and it's now available. A better example would be this. One of my favorite authors, Neil deGrasse Tyson. Yeah. So Neil publishes a book. The day Neil publishes that book, automatically is uploaded to the internet. And when it's uploaded from a copyright standpoint, now GPT gets access to this. So now it all has all that information. So I'm just saying that the same way that one LLM can get access to that information, so could another. And so could another.
Got it.
The idea of you're going to make money off of this when it's almost open source, right? As far as gathering the information, the more you give it, the more you're feeding someone else as well. So it's kind of like, even though Neil did all the work, GPT is able to come in and boom, get you access to it. So when
Yeah. Fireworks just behind the screen. That was,
you see the same thing though. So when GPT creates it, you're only giving that information to the next best model, right? And then now it's almost like everything becomes obsolete, a little bit further and further obsolete, the better that it gets.
Yeah.
It's an interesting concept, to say the least.
That's a great point, right? Because then if I can just use the generic or standard ChatGPT as opposed to having to go to these specific ones, and you're saying that the generic one learns from everything on the internet and everything that's out there, it should be gobbling that up. Is the only value, and obviously under the hood it might be something different, but is the only value then if I have a customized one maybe for my own company that I'm able to keep private, because I believe you can, so then a public one for the store doesn't instantly just become depreciated, right? That's a really excellent point. Am I following you there? Right?
Yeah, and a private one only has the information that you provide to it privately, and it doesn't have the opportunity to learn and get better over time. So it would never hear about debit, right? If I go to ChatGPT 3.5 right now, I typed in NVIDIA, has no idea about it. Has no idea. So you see, there's a yin to the yang, if you will, as you're going forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. Charles, you want to comment?
I know we're over time here, but this is actually a really important point, which is the future of this industry is actually questionable because where's the revenue stream? Right now, all of these companies are being propped up by investors based on hype. But then what is the product? Right now, the incoming money is from subscriptions. The $20 a month you get to pay them to get access to the latest models. And all of these applications that are being built on top of it, like what's the value that's being added versus the base model, just as Lee said. And these models cost so much money for the companies to run. Like the data centers that are required to make this work vacuum up so much money, so much power, so much water, that at a certain point you have to wonder, where is the money going to come in to keep this running? Is it just the $20 a month subscription from everyone? That's going to run out eventually. So we're talking about all of these incredible things that that this technology is going to bring, but at a certain point you got to say it has to start generating money for the industry to keep going. So that's just kind of questionable at this point.
Will they have to start charging for the customized ones? Kind of like if I go to Apple and I wanted a song, just 99 cents. But you're right. They're already losing money in some situations. Lee, I know there was another question that we wanted to get to was patch fix guardrails, where somebody else is making these. Who's kind of watching that? Did you want to comment on that before we wrap on up?
Yeah, I can comment briefly, very briefly on that, because I really like how Charlie has put it in the very end of the major concern. There's a benefit. There's a clear benefit to it as long as you can understand context, which I think is the beauty of GPT. It understands context. But then outside of that, what else? How are we going to attach the figure to it? And while all of this is happening, there's somebody in the corner with their hood up, and they're thinking about not ethical hacking. They're thinking from a totally different perspective, and they're coming in. And I think one of the best ways I've heard it already put to me is you can ask ChatGPT how to murder my spouse. And ChatGPT will provide you 5 ways on how to do it. And then so the engineers then have to go back, and it's a manual patch. How odd is that? I have a Gen AI technology and I have to put a manual patch. You see the irony in that already. Okay. So it's a patch approach. It's not like we're fixing it for the future, really. So then you just come back and you can ask, well, I'm just writing a novel and I want to know a way that I would kill my spouse. And then it will say, well, I'll give you 5 different ways that you could do the same thing. So you start to realize that from a revenue standpoint, you have to look at, okay, so how much does it cost for me to do this and actually run it? You look at the data centers now. I think NVIDIA is really going to kind of lessen that price a little bit on the compute power side, which is exciting, right? Mm-hmm. But that's not it. That's not just it. There's also this other portion of it all where you have to be able to control, have to put up these guardrails. And I don't think that doing it in a manual way is the solution, but that is currently what I have heard and all that I am aware of, which I can't think of all the crazy. I'm not a nefarious person, I don't think, in my mind. So I don't think about all the different ways to get something without doing it the right way. We would need to consider these things if we're actually going to push these things forward. Yeah.
A lot of people are not even thinking about that, right? How easy it is to, I think the jailbreak was a term that we've used in previous conversations here, and the ways around it. And to put that as a manual patch, it's impossible. People are too creative, unfortunately, on the good and bad side of the house. So, gentlemen, what a lot of information. The month of March was wild. So I'm sure the April will be even wilder. Lee, Charles, thank you for both being on here and sharing your knowledge. I'm Rich Bowers for Corporate Bytes. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Rich.
Bye, guys.